When I make bolognese sauce, I make a giant pot because you can use it for a ton of things and it freezes really well. My bolognese starts with a whole pound of carrots. They make the sauce sweet and hearty. The skins are bitter, so I take them off. So are the root ends. You got to cut them off too. The tips just tend to be a little bit dried out. Doesn't really matter if you cut them off. Now to dice carrots, you cut them in half, then you cut each half into long, thin slices. Then you lay the slices flat and you cut them into matchsticks. Then you cut across the matchsticks to make a fine dice, and this is going to take forever, and I am using my food processor. This usually goes better if you break the carrots into chunks before you put them in. There, doesn't need to be too fine nor too perfect, because this is going to cook for hours. It'll all break down. Now I do one large red onion, and onions you really do need to cut into a few chunks before you process them, and only doing one half at a time helps too. Otherwise some big pieces just seem to never get cut up, they just spin around. This is my 10-quart Dutch oven. If I could only have one pot or pan in my whole kitchen, this would be it. You can do almost anything in it, but for this, use the largest pot that you've got, or maybe a couple of smaller ones. Gonna fry the veggies in olive oil on high heat. There's a ton of water in these, so they're not gonna burn as long as you keep them moving. We just got to give them a head start on the cooking. When they've shrunk down and they're looking soft, I dump them out. More oil in the pan, and then 3 pounds of ground meat. This is beef chuck, but you could use something leaner like sirloin, but I really like the fat. And sometimes I use lamb too, which is really nice. Now, this is the most important and labor-intensive step of the whole process. I switch over to a wooden spoon, and I use it to mash up the ground meat as I am stirring it around. I'm really going to town on this stuff, breaking it all apart. I don't want little meatballs in this sauce, and if they form now, it'll be nearly impossible to break them up later. So with that rigid spoon, I'm just stirring and mashing, stirring and mashing. 5 minutes go by, and now the meat is kind of gray and swimming in liquid. A lot of people think that's fat. It's mostly water, and it will boil off. Just keep cooking on high heat and keep everything moving, or it'll stick and burn. Another 5 minutes go by, and as the water evaporates, the sound changes. Instead of hissing, the pan starts to roar and crackle. That is the sound of all those little bits of meat starting to fry in their own rendered fat. Now is when this will change from gray to brown, and the kitchen will suddenly smell different. It'll smell amazing. If you're not doing this with your ground beef recipes, you are missing out. Now comes the secret ingredient, a pound of chicken livers. I am not kidding. I lifted this idea from Barbara Lynch. It is genius. I just dump them in the food processor. I don't want to turn them into pate, but something just short of that. And in they go toward the end of the browning process. Liver gets gritty if you overcook it. Then I stir in a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, and at this point you got to be really careful. See that carpet of brown stuff stuck to the bottom? The second that's about to burn, I pour in a whole bottle of white wine and scrape like a motherfucker. Scrape, 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 scrape the whole bottom off because it tastes good, and if you leave it there, it's gonna burn. Vegetables go back in. They would have burned if I'd left them in while I browned the meat. Then a good quality 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Then another one. And then another one. I'm going for something halfway between the traditional ragu alla bolognese, which has hardly any tomato at all in it, and the traditional Italian-American meat sauce, which is basically tomato sauce with little clumps of ground beef floating around in it. I like something in the middle of those extremes. Here comes my favorite cheat, liquid chicken bouillon, a big spoonful. It's crazy salty, but this big pot needs salt, so it's fine. Now, I just get this to a heat where it's kind of burbling, and I'm going to cook it for 3 hours, stirring every 15 minutes or so to make sure the bottom doesn't catch and burn. While we're waiting, let's talk about those chicken livers. Don't be freaked out. This sauce will not taste like liver. You don't have to tell anybody they're in there. It will, however, taste meatier than any meat sauce you've ever had, and that is thanks in no small part to the livers. All right, it's been 2 hours. Let's have a look at this thing. I'm always amazed by how little this reduces, and yet it does thicken up. I reckon that's just from all of the solids breaking down. This is when I season. I do about a tablespoon of dried basil, dried parsley, dried oregano, and a little less dried thyme. I have no idea how much garlic powder that is. Whole bunch of pepper, and then this instant source of sweet and sour, maybe a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. I generally think dried herbs are better for long-cooked dishes, and even then I think they taste better if you put them in during the last hour of cooking. The vinegar you could put in whenever, as long as the sauce is hot. That'll boil off the harsh vinegar scent. Okay, an hour later, and I put some pasta on the boil. Look at how thick and rich that is now. Time to give it a taste. I'll do a little bit more balsamic and some salt. Remember that all sauces should be too strong because their flavor will be diluted by the rest of the food. Drain the pasta, and I just do a couple of big spoonfuls of sauce per portion with a little fresh herb in there. That's parsley. Grate some cheese on top, and I like to drizzle some raw olive oil on the plate. Now that is damn good, but let me show you a variation. Sometimes I spoon some sauce into a pot and drizzle in some heavy cream. Boil it until the cream thickens and throw in the pasta and some fresh basil, and that is sweet and sour and meaty and velvety and rich all at the same time. Once the rest of the sauce cools down a bit, I just smear it into a whole bunch of ice cube trays. You could freeze it in a big plastic bin or something, but this makes it so easy to thaw out exactly the amount that you need. Throw them in the freezer, come back the next day, and just twist to release them and dump them into a giant Ziploc bag. Then, when you get home at the end of a long day, you just grab 3 cubes per person, throw them in a bowl, and microwave until thawed. And while it's still hot, put in a little bit more balsamic. That really brightens it back up again after it's been in the freezer for a while. And again, that hot sauce will boil off the harsh nose of the vinegar. Just throw that on your pasta, and you've got a deeply flavored, slow-simmered, home-cooked meal in like 10 minutes, or however long it took to boil the pasta. I don't know what I would do without this stuff. It's great. I had some extra that I didn't freeze, by the way. I am going to use that to make my lasagna, which is going to be the next video that I edit.